The gold band slipped from Clara Sutherland's trembling finger into the undertaker's weathered palm, and she wondered if her heart would ever feel whole again. It was 1878 in Kingston, Nevada, a silver mining town that had swallowed too many dreams and now claimed another life, that of her dearest friend Sarah, who had died bringing her second child into a world that would never know its mother's warmth. Clara had arrived in Kingston 3 months earlier with nothing but determination and that wedding ring, a relic from a marriage that ended when influenza took her husband 2 years past in St. Louis. The ring was all she had of value, and Sarah had been the only person in this harsh desert town who had shown her genuine kindness, who had helped her find work at the general store, who had made her feel less alone in a place where loneliness seemed to seep from the very rocks. "This will cover the burial and the headstone," the undertaker said, his voice flat with the practiced neutrality of a man who had seen too much death. "I will make sure she rests proper." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She walked out into the brilliant Nevada sunlight that seemed cruel in its indifference, the heat already building though it was barely past 8 in the morning. The main street of Kingston stretched before her, dusty and alive with the sounds of a town that never stopped moving, never stopped hoping that the next vein of silver would make someone rich. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except grief and a bone-deep weariness that made her 24 years feel like 40. She did not notice the man watching her from across the street, leaning against the post outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. Russell Yates had been in Kingston for 5 years, working as a ranch hand on the Double T spread just outside town, and he made it his business to notice things. He had seen Clara around, had admired the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the obvious hardship etched in the careful mending of her dress and the thinness of her frame. He had been in the general store yesterday when Sarah's husband had come in with the terrible news, had seen the color drain from Clara's face, had watched her steady herself against the counter before rushing out to be with her friend. Now he watched her walk away from the undertaker's, her shoulders straight despite everything, and something in his chest tightened. Russell was 27, tall and lean from hard work, with dark hair that always seemed to need cutting and brown eyes that missed very little. He had grown up in Texas, learned to ride before he could properly walk, and had drifted west after his own family was lost to a Comanche raid when he was 19. He understood grief. He understood the hollow space it left behind. He pushed off from the post and crossed the street, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Clara had stopped in front of the general store, staring at the door as if gathering strength to face the day ahead. He cleared his throat softly so as not to startle her. "Miss Sutherland," he said, removing his hat, "I am sorry about your friend. Sarah was a good woman." Clara turned, her green eyes red-rimmed but dry now. She recognized him vaguely, one of the cowboys who came into the store for supplies. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. Russell Yates." "Most folks call me Russell." He shifted his weight, suddenly uncertain. He had never been smooth with words. "I could not help but see you at the undertaker's. If there is anything you need, anything at all, I would be glad to help." "That is kind of you." Her voice was hoarse. "But there is nothing anyone can do now. It is done." He wanted to say more, to offer something that might ease the grief he saw in her face, but she had already turned away, disappearing into the dim interior of the store. Russell stood there for a long moment, hat in hand, feeling useless. Then he settled his hat back on his head and walked toward the undertaker's office. Marcus Webb looked up when Russell entered, his rheumy eyes curious. "Help you with something, Russell?" "The woman who was just here, Miss Sutherland. She paid for Sarah Morgan's burial. That she did. Gave me her wedding ring." Gold band, simple but good quality. I was surprised, knowing she does not have much. Russell reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He counted out bills onto the undertaker's desk, more than enough to cover a burial and headstone. I want to buy that ring back. Give her this money instead. Tell her it was an anonymous donation, that someone in town wanted to help with the burial costs. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That is a decent thing you are doing. Just make sure she gets the ring back without knowing it came from me. Can you do that? I can manage that. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out the gold band, placing it in Russell's palm. The metal was warm from being in the drawer, delicate and worn smooth with years of wearing. Russell could see an inscription inside. Forever bound. He closed his fist around it carefully and nodded his thanks. As he left the undertaker's office, he turned the ring over in his palm, thinking. He could not just give it back to her directly. She would refuse it, would insist on paying for the burial herself. He needed to be smarter about this. The funeral was held 2 days later in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking Kingston. The desert stretched out endlessly beyond, sage and scrub under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. A decent crowd gathered, more than Russell had expected. Sarah's husband stood with their surviving child, a boy of 4, both of them looking lost. Clara stood slightly apart, dressed in a borrowed black dress that was too large for her thin frame. She held herself rigid, as if afraid that if she allowed herself to bend even slightly, she would break completely. Russell stayed at the back of the gathering, hat in hand, and watched as the simple pine coffin was lowered into the ground. The preacher said words about dust and resurrection, about God's mercy and eternal rest. Russell had heard it all before, had stood at too many gravesides for someone his age. The words never seemed to help much. After the burial, the townspeople dispersed slowly, offering quiet condolences to Sarah's husband before returning to their lives. Clara lingered, standing by the fresh grave with her head bowed. Russell waited until everyone else had left before approaching. "It was a good service," he said quietly. She looked up, seeming surprised to find him there. Yes, she would have appreciated it. She paused, then added, "The undertaker returned my ring this morning. He said someone had made an anonymous donation to cover the costs." "Do you know anything about that?" Russell kept his expression neutral, though his heart picked up its pace. "This is a small town. People look out for each other. I need to know who it was. I need to thank them or pay them back somehow. Maybe they do not want thanks. Maybe they just wanted to do something kind." He met her eyes steadily. "Maybe you should just accept the gift for what it is." She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through him. But finally she nodded. "Maybe you are right." She looked down at her left hand, where the ring now rested back in its familiar place. "I should not have been so quick to give it up, but I could not bear the thought of Sarah in an unmarked grave, forgotten. That shows the kind of friend you are." Russell turned his gaze to the distant mountains, purple-blue in the afternoon heat. "She was lucky to have you." "I was lucky to have her." Clara's voice wavered slightly. "She was the only friend I had here." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with loneliness. Russell took a breath, gathering his courage. "You have another friend now if you want one. I know I am just a ranch hand and we have barely spoken, but I mean what I said. If you need anything, you can count on me." Clara looked at him fully then, really looked at him, and Russell felt exposed under that green-eyed gaze. He saw her take in his worn but clean clothes, his calloused hands, the honest directness in his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied something, because her expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Russell. That means more than you know." They walked back down the hill together in companionable silence. and Russell felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening that he had not known was closed. Over the next few weeks, Russell found reasons to come into town more often than his work strictly required. He would stop by the general store for supplies he did not really need, just to see Clara behind the counter, to exchange a few words that grew easier each time. He learned that she had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a seamstress, that she had married young to a clerk who treated her kindly but died before they could build the life they had planned. He learned that she loved to read but rarely had money for books, that she had a talent for numbers that was wasted on simple store transactions, that she dreamed of having a real home again someday, instead of the tiny room she rented above the dress shop. He told her about Texas, about growing up on a ranch that was more dust than grass, about losing his family and drifting until he found work at the Double T. He told her about the horses he trained, the open range that stretched for miles, the way the stars looked when you were far from town lights. He did not tell her about the nightmares he still had sometimes, about finding his family's burned cabin, about the guilt that gnawed at him for being away when they needed him most. Clara began to look for him, Russell realized. When he walked into the store, her face would brighten just a fraction, her shoulders would relax. They began to take walks in the evening when her work was done, strolling the dusty streets of Kingston as the brutal heat of the day gave way to cooler air. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily now. "Why did you really come to Kingston?" Clara asked one evening as they walked past the Silver Dollar Saloon, where piano music spilled out into the street. Russell considered lying, then decided she deserved the truth. "I was running from ghosts, thought if I went far enough I could leave them behind. Did it work? Not really. Turns out ghosts are portable." He glanced at her. "What about you? Why Nevada? Same reason, I suppose. After Daniel died, St. Louis felt like it was suffocating me. Everyone looked at me with such pity, like I was this tragic figure. I wanted to go somewhere no one knew me, where I could just be Clara again instead of poor widowed Clara." "And has it worked?" She smiled slightly. "Not really. Turns out loneliness is portable too." They laughed together, a quiet shared understanding passing between them. Russell felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the Nevada heat. One Saturday afternoon, Russell rode into town with his horse limping slightly. He took the animal to the livery stable, where old Tom, the stable master, examined the hoof and shook his head. "Stone bruise. He will be fine in a week or so, but you should not ride him until then." Russell nodded, running a hand along his horse's neck. "I will walk back to the ranch then." "That is 15 miles in this heat. You will kill yourself." Tom spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Stay in town for the night. Get a room at the boarding house." Russell considered it. The ranch would not miss him for one night, and the thought of spending an evening in town, perhaps taking supper with Clara, was more appealing than the long walk home. He paid Tom to stable his horse and headed for the boarding house with his saddlebags over his shoulder. An hour later, cleaned up and wearing his better shirt, he found Clara just closing up the general store. She looked tired, strands of dark hair escaping from the bun at the nape of her neck. "You are still in town," she said, surprised but pleased. "My horse needs rest. I am staying the night." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you have supper with me? There is a decent restaurant down by the hotel." A blush crept into her cheeks. "I would like that." The restaurant was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasting meat in the air. They sat by the window, watching Kingston settle into evening. The food was good, better than the ranch chow Russell was used to, and the company was even better. Clara laughed at his stories about stubborn horses and the pranks the ranch hands played on each other. He found himself mesmerized by the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, by the graceful movement of her hands as she talked. "I have been thinking," Clara said as they finished their meal, "about what I want to do with my life. Working at the general store is fine for now, but it is not what I want forever." "What do you want?" She looked down at her plate, suddenly shy. "It will sound foolish. Try me. I want to open a bookshop. A real one with books from back east and maybe some from England. Somewhere people can come not just to buy books but to talk about them, to share ideas." She looked up at him, defiant. "I know it is impractical. I know Kingston is a mining town and most people here are more interested in silver than literature, but it is what I want." Russell leaned back in his chair, studying her. "It does not sound foolish at all. It sounds like a dream worth having. Dreams cost money, so you save, you plan, you work toward it." He reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "You are one of the strongest people I have met, Clara. If anyone can make an impossible dream real, it is you." She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his, and Russell felt that touch all the way to his bones. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the table, the noise of the restaurant fading into background murmur. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me, always." They walked back through town slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. When they reached the dress shop where Clara rented her room, she turned to him. "I have had a wonderful time tonight. So have I." Russell wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his chest ached with it, but he held back. It was too soon. She had been through too much. "Can I see you tomorrow? Maybe we could take a picnic out to the edge of town, somewhere cooler." "I would like that very much." He watched her climb the outside stairs to her room, waited until she was safely inside before turning toward the boarding house. He felt lighter than he had in years, like something heavy he had been carrying had finally been set down. The next day dawned hot and bright, the sun already fierce by 7 in the morning. Russell borrowed a horse from the livery and packed a picnic basket with help from the restaurant owner, who seemed amused by his nervousness. When he collected Clara mid-morning, she wore a simple blue dress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the sun, and Russell thought she had never looked more beautiful. They rode out of town together, Clara sitting in front of him on the saddle, and headed toward a spot Russell knew where cottonwood trees grew along a mostly dry creek bed. It was not much, but it offered shade and relative coolness, and it felt like a different world from the dusty streets of Kingston. They spread a blanket under the trees and unpacked the basket, sharing bread and cheese and cold chicken, washing it down with lukewarm water from Russell's canteen. Afterward, they lay on the blanket looking up through the cottonwood leaves at the impossible blue sky. "Tell me something true," Clara said. "Something you have never told anyone else." Russell thought about it. "Sometimes I am afraid I do not deserve good things. Like there is something broken in me that makes me unworthy of happiness." Clara turned onto her side to face him, propping herself up on one elbow. "That is the saddest thing I have ever heard. Your turn. Tell me something true." She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "I gave away my wedding ring not just for Sarah, but because part of me wanted to let go of the past. I felt guilty about it, like I was betraying Daniel's memory, but I also felt relieved. Does that make me terrible? It makes you human." Russell reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "We are allowed to move forward, Clara. The people we have lost would want that for us. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, the weight of all that grief would drown us." She leaned down slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted, and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Russell's hand came up to cup the back of her head, drawing her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that made his heart race and his blood sing. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara smiled down at him. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. You should have. Would have saved me a lot of lost sleep." She laughed and settled against his side, her head on his chest. Russell wrapped his arm around her and stared up at the cottonwood leaves, feeling more content than he could remember being in his entire life. They spent the afternoon talking and kissing and planning impossible futures. Clara told him more about her bookshop dream, growing animated as she described the shelves she would build, the reading corner with comfortable chairs, maybe a small lending library for those who could not afford to buy. Russell listened and encouraged and found himself believing it could happen. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you dream about?" "Honestly, I have not let myself dream much." He ran his fingers through her hair absently. "But lately, I have been thinking about having my own place. Not a big ranch, just a small spread where I could raise horses, train them properly. Maybe build a house that feels like a home." "That sounds wonderful." "It does it not?" he smiled. "Especially if there was someone to share it with." She kissed him again, slower this time, and Russell thought that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen to broken people after all. As summer deepened into fall, their relationship blossomed. Russell came to town every chance he got, and Clara began visiting the Double T Ranch on her days off, riding out with Russell on his now healed horse. The ranch hands teased him mercilessly about being lovesick, but it was good-natured, and the ranch owner, Tom Thornton, actually seemed pleased. "About time you found yourself someone," Tom said one evening as Russell prepared to ride into town. "You have been walking around here like a ghost for too long." Russell could not argue with that. Clara had brought him back to life in ways he had not thought possible. The nightmares came less frequently now, and when they did, he found himself thinking of her smile, her laugh, the way she fit perfectly in his arms, and the darkness would recede. In late September, Russell was helping move cattle to winter pasture when Tom rode up beside him, an unusual tension in his weathered face. "Need to talk to you when we get back to the ranch house," Tom said. Russell's stomach tightened with worry, but he nodded and kept working. It was nearly dark by the time they returned, and Tom invited him into the house, something he rarely did. Inside, Tom poured them both whiskey and sat down heavily. "I am selling the ranch," Tom said without preamble. "My brother back in California is sick, and I need to go help his family. I have a buyer lined up, some outfit from San Francisco. They are bringing their own crew." Russell felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "When?" "They will take possession in January. I am sorry, Russell. I know this is sudden." "No, I understand. Family comes first." Russell stared into his whiskey glass, his mind racing. "I will start looking for work elsewhere." "There is more." Tom leaned forward. "The South 40 acres, the section by the creek with those big cottonwoods, that is not part of the sale. I am keeping it separate." "I thought maybe you might want to buy it." Russell looked up sharply. "I do not have that kind of money." "I know what you make, and I know you are a saver. I also know you are one of the best horsemen I have ever seen, and you have been loyal to this ranch for 5 years. Tom named a price that was far below market value. "I will hold a note for the rest, payable over 5 years. You could build a place there, start that horse training operation you have talked about. Lord knows there is a market for well-trained horses." Russell's heart was pounding. It was everything he had dreamed about laid out in front of him like a gift. "Tom, I do not know what to say. Say yes. Build something good there. Maybe raise some kids to chase around those cottonwoods." Tom grinned. "That Clara of yours seems like she would make a fine rancher's wife." Russell laughed, feeling tears prick his eyes. "Yes. God, yes, thank you. They shook on it, and Russell rode into Kingston that night despite the late hour and the darkness, his heart full to bursting. He found Clara's window and threw pebbles at it until she appeared, looking alarmed. "Russell, what is wrong? Come down, please, I need to talk to you." She disappeared from the window and emerged a few minutes later, wrapped in a shawl over her nightgown. "You scared me half to death. I thought something terrible had happened. Something wonderful happened." He took her hands in his. "Tom is selling the ranch, but he is selling me 40 acres at the south end, the land where we had our picnic. I can build a house there, start training horses. Clara, I can build the life I have dreamed about." She threw her arms around his neck, laughing. "Oh, Russell, that is amazing." He pulled back enough to see her face in the moonlight. "I want you to be part of it. I know we have only been courting a few months, and I know I should wait and be proper about this, but Clara, I love you. I want to build that house for us, for our life together. Will you marry me?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Oh yes, of course I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, not caring that they were standing in the middle of the street in the middle of the night. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. "We should tell people," she said. "We should make it official. We will, tomorrow. Tonight I just wanted to share it with you first." He touched her face gently. "You have given me my life back, Clara. I did not think I could feel this happy again." "Neither did I." She kissed him again, softer this time. "We are going to build something beautiful together." They were married in early November at the small church in Kingston. It was a simple ceremony, but the church was packed with people from town and the ranch. Sarah's husband came with his son, standing solemnly in the front row. Clara wore a new dress she had made herself, pale green that brought out her eyes, and she carried wildflowers that Russell had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Russell kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. Afterward, there was a celebration at the Silver Dollar Saloon, which Tom had rented out for the occasion. There was music and dancing, food and drinks, and more laughter than Russell could remember hearing in one place. As the evening wore on, Russell found himself standing at the edge of the crowd, watching Clara dance with old Tom. She was glowing, radiantly happy, and he felt his chest tighten with love so fierce it almost hurt. "You did good, son," Tom said when he brought Clara back to Russell's side. "She is a keeper. I know it." Russell took Clara's hand, noting the way the gold wedding band caught the lamplight. She had insisted on keeping her first wedding ring but moving it to her right hand, wanting to honor her past while embracing her future. Russell had understood completely and loved her more for it. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Kingston, a luxury that felt almost sinful after months of careful saving. In the morning, they rode out to their land together, to the 40 acres that would become their home. "Where should we build the house?" Clara asked, standing in the middle of the property with her arms spread wide. "Under the cottonwoods, I think, close enough to the creek to have water, high enough to avoid flooding." Russell came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Big enough for children to run around in." She leaned back against him. "How many children are we talking about?" "As many as you want to give me." He kissed the side of her neck. "Or none, if that is what you want. As long as I have you, I have everything." "I want a house full of noise and love," she said softly. "I want to build something lasting." "Then, that is what we will do." They spent the winter living in a small cabin on the Double T Ranch while they built their house. Russell worked on construction every spare moment, and Clara helped when she could, though she still worked at the general store to bring in steady money. By spring, the house was finished, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows that let in plenty of light. It was not grand, but it was solid and well built, and it was theirs. Moving day was chaos, though they had precious little to move. Clara's few possessions, Russell's even fewer, looked lost in the spacious rooms. But Clara immediately began making plans, sketching out where furniture would go, talking about curtains and rugs and all the homey touches that would make the house feel lived in. "I have been thinking," Russell said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, "about your bookshop dream. What about it? What if we built it here? Not right away, but in a few years when we are more established. We could add on to the house, create a space for books. People could ride out from town, make a day of it. We could have books and horses, maybe offer riding lessons for children while their parents browse." Clara turned to him, eyes wide. "Could we really do that? I do not see why not. We are building our life the way we want it. Why should that not include both our dreams?" She kissed him, slow and sweet. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour or so. I was starting to worry." She laughed and settled against his side, and they watched the sun disappear below the horizon together. Their first year of marriage was hard work, but deeply satisfying. Russell began training horses, starting with animals from local ranches who needed gentling or breaking bad habits. His reputation grew quickly. He had a gift for understanding horses, for seeing what they needed and providing it with patience and skill. By the end of the year, he had more work than he could handle and had to start turning people away. Clara continued at the general store but began ordering books through the store's suppliers, building a small inventory in their spare bedroom. She spent evenings cataloging and reading, learning about the business she wanted to build. Russell would often find her surrounded by books, utterly absorbed, and he would smile and leave her to it, content to work on saddles or tack in the barn. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Russell one evening after supper, unable to keep the news to herself any longer. "I think I might be expecting," she said, watching his face carefully. Russell went very still, then broke into a smile so wide it looked like it might split his face. "Truly. I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs are there." She bit her lip. "Are you happy?" He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, thrilled, amazed, all of those things at once. "I am terrified too," she admitted. "After what happened to Sarah. That will not happen to you." He pulled back to look at her fiercely. "I will not let it. We will get the best doctor, do everything right. You are going to be fine, and our baby is going to be fine. You cannot promise that. Watch me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We are going to have a beautiful, healthy baby, and you are going to be an amazing mother." Their son was born in December of 1880, during the first big snowstorm of the season. The doctor barely made it from Kingston in time, arriving red-faced and covered in snow. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Russell thought he might go mad from fear, pacing outside the bedroom while Clara labored. But finally, he heard the thin wail of a newborn, and the doctor appeared at the door with a tired smile. "You have a son. Mother and baby are both doing well." Russell rushed past him into the bedroom, where Clara lay exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Look what we made," she whispered. Russell sat on the edge of the bed and peered down at his son, this impossibly small person with a red, wrinkled face and tiny fists waving in the air. Something shifted in his chest, a fierce, protective love that was unlike anything he had ever felt. "He is perfect," Russell said, his voice rough. "You are perfect. Thank you." They named him Daniel Russell, honoring both their pasts while building their future. Little Danny proved to be a healthy, lusty baby with powerful lungs and an iron will. Clara recovered well from the birth, though those first months were exhausting as they adjusted to parenthood. Russell would often find Clara in the rocking chair late at night, nursing Danny by lamplight, and he would sit on the floor beside them, just watching in quiet wonder at this family they had created. He had not thought he could be this happy, had not thought he deserved it, but here it was anyway, a gift he was determined to treasure. As Danny grew from infant to toddler, Clara began seriously planning her bookshop. Russell built an addition onto the house, a large room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and large windows for natural light. Clara filled it with books, more than Russell had known existed, ordered from suppliers back east. She created a cozy reading corner with comfortable chairs, and even convinced Russell to build a small play area for children who came with their parents. Sutherland's Books and Stables opened in the spring of 1882. It was exactly what Clara had dreamed of, a place where people could come to buy or borrow books, to discuss ideas, to escape the harsh realities of frontier life for a little while. The combination of bookshop and horse training business proved to be inspired. Families would come out from Kingston for the day, the men to bring horses for training or to watch Russell work, the women and children to browse books and enjoy the peaceful setting. On opening day, Clara stood in the doorway of her bookshop, watching people browse her shelves, and Russell saw tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right." She leaned against him. "I keep thinking about that day I gave away my wedding ring, how empty and lost I felt. And now look at all of this. Look at what we have built." Russell pulled the delicate gold band from his vest pocket, the same ring he had bought back from the undertaker all those years ago. He had carried it with him every day since, a reminder of the moment that had changed his life. "You know it was me, do you not?" he asked quietly. "Who bought this back for you?" Clara looked at the ring, then up at him, and smiled. "I have known for a long time." "You are not as subtle as you think, Russell Yates. Why did you never say anything?" "Because it was a gift of love before you could even admit you loved me. I wanted to keep that close to my heart." She took the ring from his palm and slipped it onto her right hand, beside her first wedding band. "Both these rings represent love and sacrifice, Daniel's love and your love. I am grateful for both." Russell pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I would buy you 1,000 rings if that is what it took to keep you happy. I do not need 1,000 rings. I just need you, and Danny, and this life we are building together." Over the next few years, their business thrived and their family grew. A daughter, Grace, was born in 1884, small and delicate where Danny had been big and boisterous. Then another son, Samuel, in 1887, who had Clara's green eyes and Russell's stubborn streak. The house rang with the sounds of children playing, of horses whinnying in the paddock, of customers discussing books on the porch. Clara expanded the bookshop to include a small circulating library and began hosting reading groups for women in the area. She became something of a fixture in the community, known for her kindness and her willingness to recommend just the right book for any mood or occasion. Russell's reputation as a horse trainer spread beyond Nevada, and he began getting requests from as far away as California and Arizona. They were happy in a way that felt almost miraculous, given the pain and loss they had both endured. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they took a rare evening alone together, leaving the children with a neighbor, and rode out to the cottonwood trees where Russell had first proposed. "You ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Clara asked, leaning back against a tree trunk with Russell's head in her lap. "If Sarah had not died, if I had not given away my ring, if you had not been there that day, all the time. Russell reached up to touch her face, but I try not to dwell on it. We are here now, and that is what matters. Do you think she would be happy for us? Sarah, I mean. I think she would be thrilled. She always struck me as someone who believed in love and second chances. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, a gesture that still made his heart race even after 10 years of marriage. I miss her sometimes. I wish she could have seen all of this, could have known that her death led to something beautiful. Maybe she does know. Russell sat up and pulled Clara into his arms. Maybe she is watching over us, glad that her sacrifice was not in vain. That is a comforting thought. They sat together as the sun set, much as they had all those years ago, and Russell felt the weight of contentment settle over him. They had built something lasting from pain and loss, had created beauty from ashes. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible. Their children grew strong and healthy, thriving in the freedom of ranch life. Danny showed an early aptitude for working with horses, spending hours shadowing his father and absorbing every lesson. Grace proved to be a voracious reader like her mother, devouring books as fast as Clara could stock them. Samuel was the adventurous one, always getting into scrapes and coming home covered in dirt and full of wild stories. As Russell approached his 40th birthday, he found himself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought him here. He had come to Nevada broken and lost, running from ghosts, and convinced he did not deserve happiness. Clara had changed all of that, had shown him that love and hope were still possible, that the past did not have to define the future. One evening, as he and Clara sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, he turned to her and said, "You saved my life, you know. That day at the cemetery, I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You changed everything." Clara took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "We saved each other. I was just as lost as you were." "Maybe that is what love is," Russell mused. Two broken people finding each other and becoming whole together. "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me," he grinned. "I have my moments." She leaned over and kissed him, and even after all these years, the touch of her lips still sent electricity through his veins. The children made exaggerated gagging noises from the yard, and Russell and Clara broke apart laughing. "Ignore them," Clara said. "They will understand someday when they are older. God help us when they start courting." Russell shuddered dramatically. "I will have to chase off every young man in 3 counties. You will do no such thing. You will be a perfect gentleman and trust that we have raised them well." "I make no promises." The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Danny grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the horse training business as Russell's joints began to ache with age. Grace opened her own small school in Kingston, teaching children to read and write, continuing her mother's mission of spreading literacy and learning. Samuel became a ranch manager for a large spread in California, writing long letters home filled with tales of adventure. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was bursting with people, children, and noise, and Russell stood on the porch looking out at the organized chaos and felt his heart might burst with joy. Clara came to stand beside him, silver threading through her dark hair now, lines around her eyes from years of smiling. She was, Russell thought, even more beautiful than she had been at 24. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "How lucky I am, how none of this was guaranteed, and yet here we are." "Here we are," she echoed. She held up her right hand, where both wedding rings still rested side by side. "I have been thinking about these rings lately, about what they represent." "What is that?" "Resilience. The ability to survive loss and keep going, to honor the past while embracing the future. To sacrifice everything for the people we love and somehow end up with more than we started with. She looked up at him, her green eyes bright. You made sure this ring found me again, and in doing so, you gave me everything I had lost and more than I had dreamed possible. Russell pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I love you, Clara Yates, today, tomorrow, and every day after that. I love you too. She smiled against his chest. Forever bound. They stood there together as the sun set over their land, over the life they had built, over the family they had created from grief and hope and stubborn love. Inside, their children laughed and celebrated, and outside the horses moved peacefully in their paddocks, and the cottonwood trees rustled in the evening breeze. It was not the life Russell had been born to, and it was not the life Clara had planned when she first married all those years ago. But it was their life, earned through pain and sacrifice, through taking chances and believing in second beginnings. And as Russell held his wife close and watched the Nevada sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue, he knew that every moment of struggle had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, impossible happiness.